Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Nicole and today I'm going to be sharing with you the 24 books that I'm hoping to read in 2024. So I'm actually going to go through this in sort of alphabetical order by title. And the reason is because that's how I chose these 24 books. If you have seen my monthly TBR game, then you know that the books on my shelf are organized in alphabetical order by title. That ties into how I choose what I'm going to read or my to be read pile for each month. And so turns out that I don't actually have books in every letter of the alphabet. I'm missing X and Z, not too surprisingly, which leaves me with 24 different sections of my bookshelf to pick books from. So I just chose one book to represent each letter of the alphabet, and that worked out perfectly to 24. So I'm going to go ahead and just get started. The first book I'm going to talk about is Armadale by Wilkie Collins. Wilkie Collins is an author that I am hoping to read to zero. I would like to read everything of his that I can get hands on. I really like his writing style and his books so far. I read The Moonstone and No Name in 2023. I don't know why it was so hard for me to remember No Name. I think because it literally has the words no name in it. There is a name to the book, and I read it in 2023. I am looking forward to reading this in 2024. And let me just read the back to you, and maybe you'll see why. Armadale deals with the emergence of autonomous, sexually active women from the dichotomies of Madonna and Magdalene, with the legal tangles of the unsatisfactory marriage laws, with the perception of the growing role of scientific intrusion into the privacy of the individual psyche. What? Yeah, so this book to me sounds like if you took No Name and The Woman in White and combined them. That sounds amazing to me. So that's Armadale. The next book on my list is The Black Tulip by Alexandre Dumas. Alexandre Dumas is another author that I am also hoping to read all of his books. And the next one I would read by him would be The Black Tulip. This is much shorter than The Count of Monte Cristo, and I've heard some vague things about this that has made me really interested in this work. Next on my list would be Cassandra at the Wedding by Dorothy Baker. All I know of this book is that it involves two twins, one of whom is going to the other's wedding, and she is not happy about it. I have heard very good things about this book. It's another short read. I've had it on my shelf not for a very long time, but I've known about it for quite a while, and so I'm excited to get to reading it, and I hope that it's this year. The book that I've already mentioned in previous videos is Drood by Dan Simmons. This is part of, well, the main and whole point of my Drood project. If you haven't watched that video, I kind of explain in more detail what my Drood project is, and I discuss this book briefly in there, but basically, this is probably the number one book I'm most excited to get to this year. But I have faith that before the end of the year, I will read this book. The next book on my list would be 4321 by Paul Auster. And for those of you who are paying attention, I'm sure you're going, Nicole, that book does not start with the letter F. However, what I decided to do on my bookshelf was to, with books that were just numbers, was I was going to write the numbers out and put them in alphabetical order that way. There's different ways you could do it. Some people would just put all the numbers at the very beginning. This is just how I chose to do it. I'm looking forward to 4321 because it has a trope that I like, which is like parallel times, or really I like any plot that plays with the idea of time and is not necessarily in terms of being nonlinear, but where the people in the book are somehow experiencing time in a unique way. My understanding is that the young man in this book, it's kind of a Bildungsroman, but what's unique about it is that the guy is born and then instantly you see, or there is, four different parallel versions of his life. And as the reader, you get to see and experience all of them. And I think they even like overlap with different people from the same lives. I'm not sure if it's parallel universes or if you're just reading about four different ways that his life could go. But I just think that idea is really fascinating, falls into sort of like the trope of timelines that I love. And I'm really hopeful that this is going to be a good read. A recent add to my library is The Englishman Who Posted Himself by and Other Curious Objects by John Tingey. I heard about this book and it was like an instant buy for me because this is a nonfiction work that the entire premise of it is just telling the story about a gentleman in the Victorian period, I believe, who read something about how the postal system worked, and basically they were just promising they would mail anything. And so he started trying to mail things through the post office to see, could he push the limits of that? So he posted all sorts of curious objects, and as the front cover shows, he eventually posted himself as well. So I'm excited to read that. It's a short little novel. It sounds like it's going to be very charming and cute, and I can't wait to read it. Moving on to the letter G, I have Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead. This book came out quite a while ago. I think when it was first shortlisted for the Booker Prize, I was very interested in the just story of it, sort of going over Amelia Earhart's life, I believe, though it's not about her life, but I don't even think it's about Amelia Earhart at all. But I think there is a woman whose story is similar to Amelia Earhart's, where she's trying to travel around the world in a plane, but I think it's more in the Arctics or something like that. And but then it also parallels the storyline with a woman who's more in the future who is acting in a movie that's about the woman in the book. So this is a very bad description of what this book is about, but I haven't actually read what it's about in quite a while, and it came out a while ago, and I've had this book for probably a good year now, and I'd really like to get to it. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. I want to read this book. That's my point. The next book, I'm wondering if I'm going to regret putting on this list, is, believe it or not, Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, and my husband's snickering in the background. I will at some point share my drama and trauma with The Heart of Darkness. But for now, I'm going to put it on my 24 most anticipated books list. And I'm wondering why. I'm, I'm having a moment like the characters in The Tale of Genji who are like, did a spirit take over her? Is she possessed? Like, I really can't. I already pre-picked out these books, and I'm really wondering why this was the one in all my H's, because I have quite a few that I picked out. It's not coming back to me. I want to say I read a book recently that mentioned The Heart of Darkness, and it made me want to reread it, but that doesn't sound like a good enough reason. Anyway, I'm going to do it anyhow, because I guess I didn't mention, but part of the reason I'm doing this list is because I have a spinner wheel in my TBR game that helps me pick book prompts, and one of the, or helps me pick books rather, and one of the spaces on my spinner wheel is going to be the 24 books list, and I'm already regretting this choice. I could change it, but I swear there's a reason that it's on here. Okay, I'm taking too long thinking about this. Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. I've read this book before, a lot. I'm not going to get into it now. Moving on. The Invisible Life by Addie Larue by V.E. Schwab. I have wanted to read about this book since I heard about it. You can definitely see at this point that I like books that have interesting things going on with time and timelines. This one isn't so much related to time, but in this, I know that Addie LaRue, she makes a deal where she cannot die and then has to kind of suffer the consequences of that, because in addition to not dying, no one remembers her even when they're still alive. So it's kind of like not even just the whammy of, everybody is dying, but the people she meets, even while they're alive, they don't remember her until apparently one day she runs into a guy who does remember her. I don't know. We'll see. I'd also like to read the second half of this bind up. This is a bind up of Joseph Andrews and Shamla by Henry Fielding. If you saw my video on the best books I read in 2023, Shamla was one of them, which is the second book in here, and it is about a young lady named Shamala. The first book in this bind up is Joseph Andrews, and the reason it's the first book in here is Joseph Andrews is supposed to be Shamala's father. So I really enjoyed Shamala. It is hilarious satire by Henry Fielding, and I cannot wait to read Joseph Andrews because I expect no less from it. Completely different note inside, I have Kokoro by Natsume Soseki. Earlier last year, in 2023, I read Lonely Castle in the Mirror, which is by a completely different author, but is about a young girl named Kokoro, and she is being homeschooled. And in the book, you learn more about her and why she's being homeschooled and sort of this magical, real, fantastical experience that she has while trying to figure out what happened to her in life, process sort of her grief and trauma, and potentially go back to school. Um, the young girl in that book is named Kokoro because it was inspired by this book, which is a Japanese classic, and it references the book quite references this book rather quite a bit in there, as well as different things that the author have said. So I kind of felt like in order to even understand that book even better, which I really liked, that I wanted to read this book. And there's supposed to be some sad themes in here and sort of dealing with the depression, I believe, which I think is the connection to Lonely Castle in the Mirror. Anyway, I figure I'll know more about what the connection is after I read this book. Moving on to some sci-fi, I have for Elle, The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. I have yet to read anything by Becky Chambers, but everything I have heard about all of her books sounds like things that I would want to read. I'm really looking forward to starting this series, and I'm hoping that it's a series that I will enjoy and continue, because that doesn't always happen with me. So we'll see. The Mystery of Edwin Drood by Charles Dickens is another book that is part of my Drood project. This is probably the last book that I would want to read right before reading Drood. And that is because this is actually the book that is sort of the inspiration for Drood. This is the last book that Charles Dickens was working on before he died. He actually died while he was still in the middle of writing it, but he got quite a bit into the mystery that most people feel like you could solve it, even though Charles Dickens himself did not write the ending, and so we don't have his ending and solution to the mystery of this book. I like a good mystery, especially a good Victorian mystery, and I'm looking forward to reading this book. Sorry if there's weird crackling sounds in the background. I don't know how much of that is coming across. My husband's cooking some yummy food, so I'm not going to stop him. I'm not going to stop myself because the lighting keeps changing. So I don't know what's going on outside, but it's nice and sunny. Moving on to N, I have Notre-Dame de Paris. Pardon my horrible French accent, by Victor Hugo. So, to most Americans, we would probably know this more as The Hunchback of Notre Dame. So I particularly picked up this Penguin edition because I did want a John Storach translation of it. I read a couple of different translations of the book, and this was the one that I wanted. I am really excited to read this because I've been wanting to read another book by Victor Hugo. I read Les Mis ages ago and really enjoyed the story, but I'm sorry, I will probably never ever reread that book because, in my opinion, it's just way too long. So I'm excited that this is a slightly less long. I mean, it's way less long compared to Les Mis' book. And I heard good things about this translation, but I had a really hard time finding it. So if you saw my recent book haul video, I believe, I picked it up when I was traveling. A bookstore actually had it in stock, and so I picked it up, and I'm super excited, and now I'm ready to read this. So continuing on with Charles Dickens, who I may or may not have mentioned, is another author that I plan on reading to zero. Uh, in my O's, I'm most looking forward to Our Mutual Friend. I have heard a lot of good things about this book. I know it's, for some people, their absolute top favorite book of Charles Dickens. I read David Copperfield and Oliver Twist last year. Loved David Copperfield. So I have a hard time imagining loving any of Charles Dickens' books more, but I'm excited to give this one a try. And like, look at this neat little cover that I found. And if you have heard anything about the story, like, this is an incident that happens very, very early on in the book, like I think first chapter of business. So I like the fact that this edition had it on the cover. Also, like, I don't know, it's not super floppy, but it just feels really nice in the hand. So I think the whole thing would be a great reading experience. I also have The Promise by Damon Galgut. This was the winner of the Booker Prize in 2021. I followed its journey from the shortlist all the way to winning that year. And even on the shortlist, this sounded like a book that I would really want to read. A bit of a family drama in there. You have, all the racial issues in South Africa are coming up in this story. And so I had gone to South Africa, I think, a few years before this book came out, and got to see firsthand some of the tensions that still exist in some areas there. So I'm very interested to read a story and hear a more modern account of what's going on there. I have another book on this list that's by Alexandre Dumas, and that would be Queen Margot. I have heard really good things about this novel as a whole. It's another nice chunky one by Alexandre Dumas, and unlike some of his major works, it's not super humongous, and it's also not a really long series. At least not that I recall. Anyway, I'm looking forward to reading this because, like I said, I'm just looking forward to reading anything that he wrote. The next book on this list, I would say BookTube made me do it, and that would be The Rain Heron by Robbie Arnott. Specifically, I would blame this on Greg at Supposedly Fun, and I know there's another booktuber out there who blames this book on him as well. So he had a series of videos one year where he kept talking vaguely about this book and how much he liked it, but he didn't want to spoil it, so he'd share absolutely nothing about the book. And for some reason, like, his excitement about it, the fact that I know nothing about this book still because I refuse to read the back. Not that I think, yeah, the back does talk about it, but I refuse to read the back of the book, and I just really want to read it because I want to know. I want to know. So that's how this book ended up on my list, and I've been anticipating reading this. It's got to be at least 2 years now, but I just hadn't bought a copy. My library didn't have a copy yet. I wasn't seeing it anywhere in stores, and then one day I came across it in a store, and I said I'm buying it so I can read it, and it was just like a month ago or so. So I'm really hoping to get this on my TBR in 2024. I also have on my list The Sorrows of Young Werther by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. It randomly came up in October when I was reading Frankenstein. I did not recall in Frankenstein that this is one of the books that is mentioned. If you know anything about Frankenstein, this is not a spoiler in any way, but the monster reads this book. The monster. The reading of this book really affects part of the story, and particularly how the monster is feeling, because yes, the monster has feelings. And I was like, gosh, I've got to know what this book is about and read this book because it has such a profound impact on the monster, and it leads him like down a dark path at one point. Basically, I really wish I had gotten the cover of this that has the young man crying. I don't know why. I just like that cover. I'll put it here on the screen so you can enjoy it as well. But for some reason, that cover is just really appealing to me. But this was the book that I found. But if I really like this story, I'm probably going to buy the version with the cover that I really like. I gotta read it first. All right, going back to Alexandre Dumas, of course, under T, there is The Three Musketeers. So I have this lovely Penguin Deluxe edition. I love when they do the comics. They even have one of Alexandre Dumas on the back. So that has nothing to do with why I got this edition. I bought this edition again because I liked this translation of this the best. This one is by Richard Prevere, yes, of Prevere and Volokhonsky, but in this case, just Prevere. And since that allowed me to go in the Penguin editions, how could I not get this cover? Like, look at that. You got parts from the story in comic form. Ah, it's well done. It's well done. So that would bring us to U, and U is for The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. I have read a couple other books by Colson Whitehead, and by a couple, I think I just mean one. I have read Harlem Shuffle by Colson Whitehead. I read that last year, and I thought it was pretty good. Not a favorite book by any means, but I thought it was interesting what he was doing in the book. I liked the topic more than I liked the writing style. So it'll be interesting to see how I feel about The Underground Railroad. I've had this book for a while. It is a winner of the Pulitzer Prize. So if you've seen my Pulitzer Prize project video, you know how I feel about the Pulitzer Prize winners. So, but despite that, I keep torturing myself with them. Not torture, really. But I keep, like, it builds up my anticipation. So, because I am interested in Colson Whitehead's writing, I've heard a lot about this book. I've heard a lot about the miniseries. I really want to read this book. I'm hoping it'll be something that I recommend as a family book club read at some point this year. So it should definitely get on my list, or it should definitely get read. Next up is Villette by Charlotte Bronte. I read Jane Eyre last year and really enjoyed that. I have not read any other of Charlotte Bronte's works, so I'm really hoping to get to this one next. I'm looking forward to reading Villette and seeing what I think of the rest of Charlotte, well, not the rest, of another Charlotte Bronte. How about that? And then wrapping up my Drood project books, because if you haven't noticed, I've tried to get them all on this list, and fortunately I've been able to more or less so, would be W for The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. So this is, I think, one of the last books by Wilkie Collins that I own other than Armadale that I haven't read. So after this point, I would have to buy more of his books. I'm okay with that. Um, and yeah, this would be a reread for me. I read The Woman in White over 20 years ago, so I recall basically nothing about it other than maybe the end. But I feel like my memory of it was I was like partially asleep when I read the end, and so even at the end of the book, I was like, wait, did what I think just happened happen? Still don't know. So I'm looking forward to a more coherent reading of this so that I can hopefully figure that out. And don't just isn't this the creepiest, most beautiful picture, like with those flowers and everything? All right. And then finally, last but not least for Y, which is the only book in my Y section, and therefore is the book in that section that I'm most anticipating reading, and that will be You Shall Not Kill. This is a huge book. Let me show you just how big. This is a huge book, both in length as well as this is a normal size trade back in height. So you can see it is both wider and taller than an average book, and it's pretty thick. And in theory, it's not 1,000 pages. It's only 980 some odd pages. So what is this book about? Fernando, a young literary editor and the son of a persecuted Spanish Republican, decides to flee a Spain battered by civil war with his friends Catalina and Eulogio, perhaps? And it says, we all run away from our past, some find their future. It sounded good to me, and it's a nice long read, so I am hoping I like it, and I'm looking forward to reading it this year. Maybe. We'll see. These are the books I'm hoping to read this year. So I hope it all works out. I'm looking forward to some more than others. Heart of Darkness, I'm looking at you. Still not sure why that book is on this list. Maybe I'm just trying to get rid of it. It is my son's book. It's going to be something I ponder for the rest of the day and when it comes up again later. Anyway, you've got the 24 books. You can keep track of them along with me as we go through the year, and we'll see if I get to them or not, and I'll report back 12 months from now. All right, that's it for today. What are you planning on reading next year? What are you looking forward to? Comment below and let me know. Like this video so other people can see it, and subscribe so you know when I do my next video. My TBR video for January should be coming out soon. None of these books are on it. Spoiler. So, interesting how that worked out. Bye.